Yeah, what kind of checks would be on police power under this? Because I grew up in a small town with small town police, and they were just as bored as we were. Who's to say they won't come and harass the ex-girlfriend's boyfriend, even though he's behaving himself? He might have gotten drunk, he might have gotten a major speeding ticket and got put on probation.
Well, there's a balance there, and I don't think we should presuppose that that police officers are going to harass everybody. I think that police officers, being human, just like reporters, well, I'm not going to go there.
like senators.
Like senators. But there are bad apples in every bunch. There's no question about that. What we're saying is that we should not automatically say that the law enforcement community is going to abuse this power. And the bill says submit at reasonable times to warrantless searches. And remember, we're talking about someone who has committed a crime, has been convicted of that crime, and has, instead of being locked up, taken as a condition that they're going to allow themselves to be supervised in the community rather than going to jail. And under those circumstances, those individuals, it seems to me, it's reasonable to expect that they would give up some of the constitutional rights that people who have not been convicted of criminal offenses continue to enjoy. Mark.
Just from the practical side of getting the legislation done, have you talked to, I guess on the Senate side, y'all have a committee of jurisdiction now, and House sort of getting up on that point. Have you talked to the people, either committee chairmen or leaders who would allow this to go forward, and have they given you any feedback in terms of getting this done? I mean, this doesn't seem like, you know, one of those bills that automatically gets sort of this realm of public policy.
I want to see what committee it gets referred to once we file it, and then I plan to have conversations with the committee chair. Hopefully it won't be filed or sent to the Ways and Means Committee, because as we know, if it gets sent to Ways and Means, that means that the committee's not going to meet and it's not going to be considered. So hopefully it'll get sent to one of the J committees, and I plan to talk with committee chair once it's been referred.
Can I go back to this point again? I'm sorry, but
Sure.
Right now, law enforcement officer can go take out a warrant if they suspect some sort of illegal activity. Can you help explain why you feel like this is necessary to take the extra step to make these people subject to a warrantless search? Are law enforcement officers having trouble getting the warrants? Does it take time? Explain why this
the time would be one factor. The probable cause requirement would be another factor. It's our belief that if someone has committed a criminal offense, and as a condition of being allowed to remain free amongst the public, that they should, and the public should reasonably expect that they would be subject to warrantless searches. Mark?
Just real quick, do you know where the DAs or sheriffs or other kind of law enforcement folks are?
It would be my understanding that that the law enforcement community would be supportive of this. I've not actually gone out and asked them to endorse it. We're going to send it to them. We're going to send it to Attorney General Cooper, and we're expecting support for the bill.
Would this apply to all probationers, supervised and unsupervised? Because the majority of people on probation are unsupervised.
It would only apply to those folks that are on supervised probation in the custody and control of the Division of Community Corrections.
Okay.
Yes.
I have an exclusionary rule question.
Yes, sir.
Representative Stam. You know, in the last few years, it seems like there have been a lot of cases where folks, the door swinging the other way, folks are actually getting out of jail for various reasons, or thinking of the Duke Cross case where there were some evidentiary issues there. You know, is this the right time to be making it easier for law enforcement to get evidence into?
Yes, this is not a matter of, we want to put the guilty in jail and spring the innocent. Now, if you recall, in the last two sessions, I was the principal sponsor, arguing on the floor for the actual Innocence Commission, the eyewitness identification bill, the interrogation bill. We want the innocent to go free, but this bill only helps guilty people. I mean, excuse me, the current rule only helps guilty people. by definition, this evidence is relevant and material as to guilt, because there's no rule against the defendant using illegally acquired testimony. There is no exclusionary rule that way. It only swings one way to free guilty people from having to face the evidence of their crimes. Joe?
Some research has shown that the exclusionary rules had the effect of having a beneficial impact on how law enforcement conducts themselves in the field. And one of them was UCLA professor cited in the Supreme Court decision that's recently issued. Are you worried that if you withdraw the exclusionary rule that there's not going to be a check on law enforcement to act in good faith and behave?
As Chief Justice Roberts pointed out, the exclusionary rule is not being abolished. It still applies if the police intentionally or grossly negligently or systemically violate the rules. What this bill does is have the good faith exception, where if they didn't intend to do wrong, or it was just a simple clerical mistake, as in the Herring case, there is no deterrence effect. And I'm aware of studies both ways, having studied this for 35 years, including at Michigan State. Let me tell you, the reason why police conduct has improved over 35 years has nothing to do with the exclusionary rule. It's the fact that we actually train police officers now to a degree that we didn't do it 35 years ago.
Other questions?
Senator Schubert.
About the press.
Press, what's the name of your press?
The County Edge.
Okay.
You mentioned a case in which a probation officer got in trouble for doing their job, or what prompted this? What are we talking about?
There was an article in the News and Observer, I have a copy of it here, written by Mr. Neff. On January the 27th, 2009, apparently Mark Hornsby was a probation officer, worked night shift. Mr. Hornsby was familiar with someone, I believe his name was Neighbors, who had been placed on probation. Knew Mr. Neighbors was actively involved on a regular basis in dealing in drugs. Mr. Neighbors knew that Mr. Hornsby was somebody that would probably keep an eye on him, so Mr. Neighbors moved to the adjoining county. Apparently, Mr. Hornsby got a tip that Neighbors was involved in some kind of drug transaction, and went with the, I believe it was the Dunn police, over to where Mr. Neighbors was. Approached him in a car. There was somebody else in the car with him. The person in the car with him left real fast. Mr. Hornsby waited for law enforcement to arrive so that there'd be a witness to the search. Apparently, as a result of that, Mr. Hornsby, who had just the year before received an award for his good probation work, was reprimanded by his supervisor, who I think is the same supervisor that spent 2 days and untold hours having her charges searched for somebody knocked over a potted plant. So that's what I understand about the background of that. And I stand to be corrected if I've got into details.
My question is, when it comes to probation, it seems like one of the major problems the state is facing is there just aren't enough people out there in the street. Now, I understand, we all know the budget situation, but given your emphasis on the large number of lost probationers, would you guys support spending a little more money to put some more people out to work?
Well, if you'll recall, the budget I think it was last year, maybe the year before last, it included additional appropriations for additional officers, and they were never hired, or at least they had not been hired. I think the first thing that needs to be done is we need to get the bureaucracy cleared up, and we need to get supervision where it needs to be, and then we need to talk about additional officers. I do think that allowing any sworn law enforcement officer to conduct warrantless searches of folks that are on probation would help with the